Hi, it's Craig and Richard here. Welcome to the first of the feedback videos in the Mindfulness course. We hope you're getting a lot out of it already, and these weekly feedback videos are really to explore some of the issues that have come up and to comment on some of the questions that have been arising during the week's practice. And so we hope that this adds some value to your experience of doing the course. I'd like to also mention that Jen and Sherelle, who are also working with us and following your comments and providing some feedback online. And please, we would very much encourage you to follow their comments on the weekly discussion boards. And also I'd like to welcome back a lot of our repeat visitors, people who did the course last time and doing it again this time. It's been fantastic to have you on board, and we're glad you got a lot out of it last time, and we hope that you get even more value this time around as well. So we're going to comment on a few of the things that have come up this week. So Richard, firstly, would you like to say a little bit about the survey as well?
Absolutely. So this happened last time we ran the course as well. A few people, when doing the surveys, sort of commented on the work engagement scale, and particularly people who aren't in paid employment sort of weren't quite sure how to respond to that. And in a perfect world, we would have used a sort of a life engagement scale, although one doesn't exist. So we had to sort of go with the next best thing, which was a work engagement scale. We tried to be clear that, if people aren't in paid employment, if they're volunteering or engaged in home duties or retired, just to answer the questions as best they could. So if you still haven't answered the questionnaire and you're still interested but weren't quite sure, that would be a really good way to think about the questions there.
Yeah, so how engaged are you with the life you're living at home? Or if you're a student with your studies, or if you're retired with the things that you're doing in your day-to-day life now. So hopefully it'll be relevant to us all. There was a lot of discussion about default mode, and it's fantastic that so many people are actually noticing this and actually realizing how distractible the mind is. Many people actually feel a bit discouraged. Oh no, I've got this distractible mind, thinking that that's a terrible thing, but it's actually a sign of progress.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
a sort of a paradox.
At least they're noticing.
That's right. And a lot of insights about multitasking. Some comments, for example, of people multitasking while actually watching the videos on mindfulness, which is interesting, answering emails and doing to-do lists and various things. And sure, start to pay attention to the experience of multitasking and distraction and default mode, but also start to experiment with mindfulness and start to see, be patient with it, but to see if there are any actual differences with that, because that's what we want, is for people to actually reflect on their own experience. But fantastic that these things are being noticed already.
Yeah, so a few people commented on multitasking being an illusion and our comments around that, and really starting to realise that complex multitasking, it's just actually not a thing. I mean, it's impossible to do. We live in this culture with this pervasive myth that we should be able to do 10 things at once, and if we're not doing that, we're not using our time effectively. But what a lot of the learners started to comment on this week is just beginning to notice that when they are actually doing more than one complex activity at a time. Now, of course, we can do simple things like walk down the street and chew gum just fine, but by the time we're driving our car and talking on our phone or trying to have multiple conversations or studying while, checking Facebook, then it does actually start to reduce our performance, our enjoyment, importantly as well, and just increases stress.
I was running a program for doctors recently. One of the doctors said he noticed he was trying to do two things while he was writing up a drug chart. He was trying to do something else as well. And when he actually looked back at the drug chart, he'd written the person's name he was talking to on the drug chart instead of the drug. It's like writing Richard, 10 milligrams to be taken twice a day.
10 milligrams of Richard. Why don't you get medicated with yourself? Right. There are worse things that could happen, but...
Yeah, and some of these errors that we make while multitasking really have serious impacts.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's true for women as well as men. This was another issue that came up, actually. And, there's this myth, isn't it? Women can multitask, men can't multitask. But the reality is that no one can do complex multitasking. I guess if you looked at it... Not well, that's true. Not well. So perhaps women are better attention switchers than men, I guess,
yes.
That might make sense given sort of traditional roles evolutionarily and that kind of thing, being able to switch the attention quicker or more effectively, but no one can multitask well doing...
That's right, because we don't actually pay attention to the two things. Now, this will come up in more detail in coming weeks.
Yeah.
But there was a question that arose about what is a complex stimuli? Now, if we're doing something like when we're trying to walk as a 10, 11-month-old, walking is a complex task. Like, Mum, don't talk to me while I'm walking, all right? It's a complex task. But after a while, it becomes a simple task. The muscle memory is there. We're so practiced in it that it happens on automatic pilot in a non-complex environment, safely and efficiently.
Yeah.
So we can pay attention to a conversation while we're walking. If you're so experienced with playing a piece of music on the piano that you can play it, the muscle memory is all there. You've played it so many times, and you could possibly have some level of conversation while you're playing that piece. There's not actually much attention going on the piece of music. It's become a simple task, if you like. There's not really much attention on it, but there's really not full attention on the conversation either.
Yeah.
So the performance in both will be down a bit, but the muscle memory is there. So things we get more practiced in, so driving initially, very complex, after a while becomes simpler. But the thing that we're actually unaware of is that even though we think we're good at something and we're doing it on muscle memory, like driving a car, talking on the phone, we're more than 4 times as likely to have an accident as if we're driving a car and not talking on the phone. It's that level of effect. And we're not actually conscious of that effect. We think, oh, we're doing it and it's all fine.
One of the things that I'd really encourage the learners to check out, though, is what happens to the level of enjoyment when they're doing that.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you might be playing that piano concerto perfectly because you played it so many times while doing something else or planning the shopping, but surely it would be much more enjoyable just to be in that piece of music, to really be in the zone.
Yeah. And the effect on memory, I think that's been brought up as well.
Yes.
And we really would encourage learners to reflect on how well do we remember things, how fully, when we're actually doing multiple things at the same time. Do we really remember what that person said and so on? And again, we'll come back to that as well. A few learners have also mentioned about falling asleep during meditation. Why not practice lying down? And mindfulness is not primarily a relaxation exercise, although relaxation often happens. But what it is about awareness, and one of the things that it shows us, sometimes when we do settle down, just being more present, we notice this sort of background level of tiredness, or maybe our metabolism's just going through that mid-afternoon dip or whatever it might be. But very often there's this background tiredness, and we notice that the mindfulness, we have a little phase of mindfulness and then just slip into sleep. That's a really good rest, but it's not mindfulness practice. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. It could be like a power nap, but it's not about training that present moment awareness, that ability to be connected to the environment. So it's a different thing. Practicing lying down, there's no reason you can't practice meditation lying down. The only problem is you're more likely to go to sleep and to have a good rest, but not to practice mindfulness.
Which is sleepfulness, not mindfulness.
That's right. Yeah. So they're two quite different things. So there's sort of restful as in calm awareness and connectedness is a different thing to that restful sleep, which is a disconnectedness from environment and so on.
It's good to remember that anything we practice gets hardwired into the brain. So if we spend 5-10 minutes a day practicing being in this kind of sleepy, dreamy mode, that's actually getting hardwired. We're going to be more like that in our day-to-day life.
We'll associate meditation with that and pretty much go straight into it when we sit to practice.
That's right. Yeah, which is not such a useful thing. So to cultivate being present and alert, but also relaxed at the same time, that's a very good thing to cultivate during meditation. Yeah. So we'd encourage our learners to work with that. Maybe sit up a little bit straighter, half open the eyes, just experiment with what it would mean to actually be alert and present during the meditation.
Yeah. And sometimes if you really aren't, and look, if we've got a lot on our plate, could be looking after 3 kids at home, could be a really full day at work and so on. If we've got a lot on our plate, then it's sometimes that little moment of rest, having that little 5-10 minutes sort of deep, mindful, sort of settling down and relaxing can be a very good thing. Get up, get the blood circulating again, and then come back and practice the meditation.
Or just take a nap.
Take a nap. Well, that's right. So, I want to say something about unplugging and connecting.
Absolutely. Look, there was some really interesting research that was done at Volkswagen a few years ago where they started turning off their BlackBerry servers overnight. And what they found is that their productivity actually improved because even though the workers couldn't send each other emails at 2 o'clock in the morning, they were going home, unplugging from the grid, hanging out with their family, getting a good night's sleep, coming back to work the next day and being refreshed and actually getting more work done in that 8 to 10 hours than if they'd been answering emails all night long. And so just unplugging from the grid sometimes, turning off the phone, flight moding the phone, going out into nature. These are all very, very good things for reconnecting with ourselves, spending a little bit of time just hanging out with ourselves and knowing what we're feeling and thinking, but also with others, of course. I mean, how often do you see people out on a date now or sitting around friends, everyone's on their phone, on their devices, and there's not a lot of connection. There's a pseudo connection that takes place.
Yes.
And actually switching that off and connecting in a sort of that more traditional way is actually very good for mental health, for performance, for a whole range of things.
Yes, that's right. So there's this sort of paradox, this sort of modern view of being connected is like a more profound disconnection from here, now, in a lot of ways.
It can be in a lot of cases, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Also, the issue of mindfulness and PTSD came up,
Yes.
that sometimes practicing mindfulness makes us aware of things that are actually uncomfortable, maybe things from the past
Yep.
and so on. Would you like to say a couple of words about that, Richard, as well? Because
Absolutely,
it'll come up
Craig.
later, but I think it's been flagged now.
It's a very important question, a very important issue. And as you said before, one of the common side effects of mindfulness is relaxation, presence, focus. These are all things that happen when people practice mindfulness. But really, mindfulness is about getting more in touch with what's actually going on in each moment. And if that is PTSD symptoms, disturbing memories, like depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff, we're going to start to become more aware of that, actually. And so there are a number of things. I mean, first of all, there's a little bit of research now about sort of the dark night of the soul, this whole thing. And sometimes when people who, have maybe psychotic symptoms or for whatever reason aren't psychologically prepared, go on long retreats where they're sitting for 10 days, 11 hours a day, whatever, in silence, they have pretty adverse reactions, an unpleasant time. And that's actually, usually against the recommendation of their doctor or the retreat organisers.
It'd be like somebody who wasn't fit and ready for it, trying to
Running a
run a marathon
marathon, yeah.
first time.
Exactly.
You're going to likely cause some problems.
And just like with a marathon, you probably want to start taking some small runs and just see how you go and maybe rest a day and just extending it gradually. It's the same with mindfulness. So, if people are doing 5 or 10 minutes a day, there's probably not going to be much adverse reaction. If anything is happening for any of the learners, disturbing memories or thoughts or whatever, just take it easy, don't torture yourself, maybe just stop and just open your eyes and look around and then maybe just meditate for a minute at a time and see if you can extend that out. And later on in the course, we'll be exploring some other strategies for working with that. Heartfulness, loving kindness, self-compassion, these kinds of things can be very useful too.
Yes, and it is important to remember that from a mindfulness perspective, it's not necessarily that something is going wrong. It's about awareness. Mindfulness will show us, we'll be more aware of the stuff that's going through our mind, our emotions and reactions, and learning to work with that in a gentle way is a very important part. So just step by step at your own pace. And of course, if anybody's ever having anything you feel like is any serious concerns, you need to see somebody, obviously, who
professionally trained.
Yeah, who can give you that more sort of personalised care.
Yeah.
Take it at your own pace and in your own way, but don't feel that that's necessarily something wrong, that it's always going to be easy, because sometimes it's a bit challenging. Like physical exercise, we're pushing ourselves a bit.
Related to that, some learners were talking about mindfulness meditation being very taxing on their brain and making them tired. And what we'd be encouraging people to do, and we'll explore this in more detail in coming weeks, is to really practice being gentle with yourself. Don't try to force your attention to be in one place. Don't drag it back or use all that effort. Maybe just to notice that we've become distracted and to gently bring it back over and over again and making that the practice. It can become quite effortless after a while. So that's certainly what we're encouraging people to do.
Yes. Because very often when somebody says, oh, it's exhausting trying to practice mindfulness or pay attention, what we're actually doing is subtly fighting with distractions, trying to stop them, constantly thinking about, am I mindful, am I getting it yet, and so on. I can remember one tutor at Monash who was doing the course. She said, oh, I was at the beach with my 5-year-old and I was sitting on the beach and I was trying to be mindful. Am I mindful yet? Am I really paying attention? Am I really seeing the ocean? And so on. She was, oh, it's exhausting. And she didn't feel she was getting anywhere. In fact, she was quite frustrated. And then her 5-year-old came over with a sand bucket and they started making sand castles. Next thing they were playing, pirates on the beach. And then she sat down after about half an hour of playing it with her 5-year-old and she realised, oh, I've just been totally in the present moment for the last half an hour, and it was effortless and it was fun, it was spontaneous. And that was the mindfulness. The thinking about, worrying about, struggling with being mindful is actually we're just struggling with a whole lot of unnecessary distraction and not actually really just connecting and being present. So children are great mindfulness teachers. There's also some comments that came up about why be mindful while running or eating or mundane tasks. Oh, it's a good time for planning. Well, we could do that. We could experiment with planning while we're running and so on, or doing some other complex task. Well, we could also experiment with using the running as almost like a moving meditation in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
A way of being more present, to cultivate just one step, one moment at a time. And see that as a way of cultivating a state of mind that at the end of the run, you get back and now sit down and with full attention, plan and prepare. That is just the running and then just the planning and preparation, for example. One of the other things too with mindfulness is a lot of athletes now are using mindfulness to help them with performance. So I can remember the first marathon I did, I was about, coming up to 5 kilometres from the end. And so many people say, oh, it gets really tough the last 5 kilometres. And I can remember all of a sudden I'd turn up out of this street and we get onto this main road and it's 5 kilometres back and all of a sudden, oh, it's really getting hard now. I started to feel like somebody had put 20-kilo pack on my back. And I was starting to struggle now. And all of a sudden I realised I'd switched into default mode. All of a sudden I was thinking about the next 5 kilometres, where up until that point it was just one manageable step by one manageable step. And oh, wait a sec, shift the attention back, unhook from all my thinking about how hard it's going to be, and just come back to the step I'm taking now.
They're kind of heavy, all those thoughts, aren't they?
Oh, wow. It was the burden of expectation and another 5 kilometres in your head. And all of a sudden it was just 1 metre, 1 metre, 1 metre. And all of a sudden the burden dropped. Patience and clarity, and it was fine to finish.
Yep.
But experiment with it. Experiment with eating mindfully. Experiment with running mindfully, talking mindfully. But also reflect on what it's like when you don't do those things, because you have to answer those questions for yourself, not us. It's your own experience that's the only satisfactory answer. Nothing that theory or the research or we say really matters at the end of the day. Just one other thing came up as well about challenging situations. They're probably situations when mindfulness matters the most. One of the hardest things, and we will be exploring this in coming weeks, so we won't say too much about it, but is that learning to be accepting, learning to be open, learning to be present in those situations is far from easy. But in a manner of speaking, that again, moment by moment, working through it, can be something that is tremendously stabilising, but also helps us to engage with the problem that may desperately need our attention. So anyway, I'm sure that things related to what we've been talking about and many more things will come up in future weeks.
Yep.
Any final comments, Richard?
No, just once again like to thank all of our learners for such a great opening week and so many comments and such lively discussion. So we look forward to hearing from you over the coming weeks.
Stay with the practice and we'll look forward to speaking with you next week.